All right, welcome to the Ask the Expert Azure IoT from Connected Assets to Connected Environments with Azure Digital Twins session of Ignite 2020. And we're going to talk a little bit about Azure Digital Twins with you, the audience. In fact, we are actually going to be taking questions from you where we will be having them answered live by our in-house experts and members of the actual development team behind Azure Digital Twins. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do here is understand how you can engage with us during this session. So you will notice that within this Teams live event, there is a chat where you can ask questions. And what we will go ahead and do is, as you ask those questions, we have a panel of moderators that are reviewing those. And if the question is deemed good and also looks like something that we can share with the rest of the audience, we will go ahead and approve them conditionally. We'd also like to inform you that if you have a question or see one that someone else has asked, and perhaps you'd like to see the answer to it as well, go ahead and upvote it using the thumbs up icon next to that question. And that will allow us to get it a little bit higher up in the queue in terms of importance. So that'll make sure that you get a better chance of having those types of questions answered in the allotted time that we have for today. And we will bring the experts actually on camera, so you actually see them live answering your questions, just like it's face-to-face. We are beating down COVID-19 the best we can with Teams technology, and hope that you can take advantage of this with us. And of course, at the end of this session, we will provide resources that you can all tune into to be able to find out more information about the Azure Digital Twins topic that we will be presenting on. Now, before we get started, I do want to inform everyone that this session is very likely going to be recorded and stored in the annals of Ignite 2020 history. So do be aware that these questions that you ask are going to perhaps make history. We do want to ask that all of our attendees, please do not spam or post any inappropriate comments in the chat. It creates extra work for us, and really just, there's enough problems already. We don't need an additional one today. And finally, I would like to inform everyone that we will be adhering to the Microsoft Code of Conduct. And essentially what this means in a nutshell is please be respectful both to the audience as well as the expert panel that will be answering the questions as part of this session. We want to make sure that this is a safe environment for all who attend and ensure that we have an excellent recording that can live on for additional attendees who might not be able to attend this session live to view at their leisure. So with that said, we'll go ahead and start introducing the expert panel. And while we're doing this, please think about some of the questions that you want to ask. We will lead in with a bit of an introduction to Azure Digital Twins after this, so you'll have a little bit of extra time. But for now, let's go ahead and get started with our experts. Going up first is Christian Shorman, who is the Azure IoT Partner PM Manager, who loves to create music in his spare time. And I'm curious, Christian, what kind of music is that? Do you go for particular styles or particular instrument involved here? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. Anything between pop and minimal music, and mostly with electronic instruments and guitar and so.
Excellent. So do you make the lo-fi type of coding music that is so popular these days that people put on in the background? Is that the style I'm hearing?
No, more like traditional styles. So.
Excellent. Well, if you want to plug your SoundCloud or wherever we can hear your music, now's the time to do it. If you don't, that's okay too. So coming up next is Ines Khalifi, the Azure IoT Principal PM Manager. And interesting fact about Ines, she actually had a career as an international and collegiate tennis player. I'm curious, because that is quite an accolade. Could you describe for us the most intense match of your tennis career?
Wow, you've hyped it up quite nicely there, Paul. Yeah, no, in a previous life, I did want to be a professional tennis player and spend a lot of time playing. Hardest match, it's hard to quantify. I played college tennis, so probably the hardest matches is when it's down to your match, and if you win, the whole team wins, and if you lose, well, the whole team loses. And then everyone's kind of gathered around you and screaming and yelling. So I think those were probably the toughest matches I've probably played. Yeah.
Love it. Yes, those individual sports where you play with a team are so just fulfilling when you're able to help carry the team across the line like that. That's amazing. Finally, I'll introduce myself really quick. I will be the moderator picking out the questions for our expert panel today. I'm a principal cloud advocate working on our advocacy team, specifically focused on IoT at Microsoft. And my claim to fame is, and you can look this up on whatever search engine you want, probably by just typing in these words, I once ordered Starbucks from a Commodore 64. And so with that, we will go ahead and move into an introduction on what is Azure Digital Twins. We'll kind of give a nice little overview to lay the framework here for those questions. And once we've got that out the way, we're going to start with the first questions that are coming from the audience.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this. I think maybe a lot of you have just watched the IoT keynote by Sam George. But at high level, yeah, Azure Digital Twins is really for us about, creating the next generation IoT solutions that really model the real world. And there's obviously a set of core capabilities that are part of Azure Digital Twins that accelerate, any customer, business, or partner for bringing that, physical representation to life digitally. And there's really 4 key pieces. One is our open modeling language. So what you would use to describe, whether it's the people, the places, the things, everything you want to kind of bring to life. And then we have the live execution environment. So as you model things in the real world, you want that to be represented, in a graph and be kept up to date and live. And that's really, at the heart of the core capabilities for Azure Digital Twins. And then obviously you want to feed that graph and augment it with interesting inputs from IoT, like IoT Hub, or from other business systems. You have other services that feed interesting data that you also want to be able to represent in that graph to get the best contextual insights that you can for your business solutions. And then, as you build that graph and digital representation of the physical world, there may be other things you want to do, like a historian analytics or AI or simulation. And we have nice integration with various services where you can output the interesting things from the graph so that you can do more at depth with some of these other Azure services as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction, Ines. And now we're going to go ahead and open this up with our first question from the audience. So this first one, which has gotten a ton of upvotes. Please keep upvoting these questions. This is 10 upvotes. So probably going to be the high score, but let's see if we can beat it. So Oliver asks, I am about to embark on a digital twin platform creation next month, and I have a ton of questions. I'll ask one by one. First, can you integrate any hardware into this solution? i.e., can I use a microprocessor like Raspberry Pi, PIC, STM32? It would be awesome if it's just a matter of use this library and integration just works. So I know there's a pleasant answer to this question. Ines, Christian, would y'all, who would prefer to take this one?
Christian, you want to talk about our hub?
So ADT basically is driven by data from devices through REST APIs. So anything that can make a REST API call, you can integrate with ADT quite easily. And so you can, pick up messages from Azure IoT Hub, and send the messages on to Azure Digital Twins, or you could use an environment like Logic Apps to generate REST API calls into ADT. Really anything that can make a REST API call can send a message into ADT and drive, like twin state.
Excellent. So in summary there, if it can make an API request, you're in business, basically.
Yep. If it can make an HTTP call, it can call us.
Yeah, and if you use IoT Hub today for all your, device telemetry at scale, device management, it's also, bring your own IoT Hub and augment that with Azure Digital Twins and other data services, and you're ready to go from a device perspective. Yep, absolutely.
Excellent. All right, now in keeping with the rules here, we're going to go with the ones that are voted the most first. And we've got a new record here, 12. And this again is from our friend Oliver on the other side. So this is a great question, by the way. For Azure Digital Twin, how easy is it to integrate with 3D visuals, for example, using something like Unity?
That's another great question. So So basically, I always like to think of Azure Digital Twins, like if you are familiar with the Model View Controller Paradigm, MVC, as a model component. Digital Twins provides a real rich data model that provides lots of events whenever data flows through the system and when data changes, and you can connect this with any sort of view that you actually like. So many people use just dashboards as views where they basically represent state values coming from Azure Digital Twins with controls and valves and gauges and things like that. Other people take this data and apply it to a map, and yet another set of people apply it to 3D data. So through the event system in Azure Digital Twins, you can do push notifications, for example, using a service like Signaler, and drive data in push mode into an application like Unity. And then in your Unity application, you can use these events like you would use any other input event to make changes to your 3D scene, change properties, change visualizations, and so on. You can also use a pull mode where you run queries, for example, based on events happening in your 3D application, where you run a query or a pull request from Azure Digital Twins. Generally, this is pretty easy. The way how people typically do this is by keeping a reference to a twin in a 3D object and vice versa, so that you basically have a bidirectional connection between a piece of geometry or a game object, let's say in Unity in your 3D scene, and a twin on the Azure Digital Twin side.
Excellent. Well, that's amazing that you can do that. I want to say that Sam's keynote had kind of an example that sort of showed this with the mixer that we saw previously. So if you did catch the keynote, there was a bit of an example of this that was sort of shown live there. So this is a great one. I like this question because coincidentally we have a slide for it. So this one, and I will go ahead and kick this one over to you because I think you can speak to this one very well. So what exactly has changed since the first version of ADT, aka the Smart Spaces implementation, since it was first emphasized the notion of connected devices? Basically, I think the gist of this question is what has changed since that first implementation of ADT? Yeah,
no, great question. We learned a lot from the previous version. As I said, at Build, we announced that we had the ADT public preview refresh, so we refreshed the capabilities, and a lot of that was based on the learnings from that, Smart Spaces focused version, as was just asked. I think the key differences really are around flexible modeling. So we talked about, if you caught Sam's keynote, he talked about the digital twins definition language. And while the previous version was very well suited for smart spaces scenarios, we did get a lot of feedback that customers wanted to model more. They wanted to represent things other than buildings. So with this updated version, using DTDL and the flexible modeling, you can literally represent and model anything: a people, a place, a thing, a business system. So that's definitely been one key piece of feedback that we did incorporate to, again, unlock a lot more use cases for customers and partners. And then we also had feedback that the tree, the hierarchy to query for insights in the tree was maybe not sufficient for some of these other use cases that customers were seeing a lot of business value from. So if you look at the refresh capabilities, we now have a graph. So it's more of a general, flexible general graph topology, and you can do more powerful queries with it as well to drive interesting insights for your business applications. Another really good, piece of feedback from developers was that as you wanted to react to things that happened in the graph, we had what we called user-defined functions. So you had to use JavaScript, and you injected JavaScript, into our API, and that was the way to basically set up compute. We had feedback that developers wanted language of choice. They wanted better tooling, better debugging for all of these things. So we have, the refresh capabilities have a integration with Azure functions. So not only do you get the same compute capabilities, and you can write your business logic to react and respond to things as they happen in the graph, but now you have first-class support in terms of tooling, language of choice, debugging. I mean, everything that comes with Azure, Azure functions from a developer experience perspective. Another critical piece of feedback that you'll see with the updated refresh, customers love the fact that they could quickly get started, but they wanted to do more with IoT Hub. And they loved that it was feeding Azure Digital Twins, but they wanted to do the device management. They wanted to do the command and control. They wanted to do a lot more. And the previous version encapsulated the hub, so it was not really accessible to developers. With the updated version, we've moved to a bring your own IoT Hub model. And that also means that for a lot of our customers who use IoT Hub heavily for all their device telemetry and device management and ingestion at scale, it's really an incremental step to take advantage of Azure Digital Twins. You don't have to start over, and that's been it's accelerated a lot of our customers who, again, not only wanted to quickly start with ADT, but also take advantage of all the full power and capability of IoT Hub, which the previous version prevented. And then probably the biggest one is, to our surprise, or good surprise, we had customers who were trying to go quickly to production. I mean, they were seeing great results, and even though it was a public preview, they really wanted to go deploy this to a lot of customers, and they were driving a lot of great business. And the scale limits and targets we had at the time were not sufficient for the accelerated growth we saw from these customers and partners. So with the public preview refresh, we've improved that leaps and bounds. We have a better architecture, and we've published our scale targets in our public preview documentation. But if you go take a look, it is much better than what the previous version had. And this refreshed capabilities and this refreshed product really sets up customers much better now for going to production and actually deploying this to customers' environments at scale. So that's probably the biggest notable change from a production readiness perspective.
Excellent. And that was a big answer. Of course, a lot of different topics covered. So if you do refer to the slide, I think you can kind of pick out the majority of those topics that Ines just covered here. I think this one was kind of brushed on a little bit in your answer, but maybe we can deep dive a little bit more. So Michael Hawkinson asks, are there any plans to add Azure Digital Twins as a selectable endpoint from the IoT Hub?
Yeah. Great question, Christian, or I guess I'll start. Yeah, there's definitely, we do have on our roadmap plans to have maybe better together integration for some of these experiences. So today, it is already a great experience, and you can pick the set of telemetry that you want from IoT Hub, and you can use Azure functions and other things to filter exactly what you need, so you don't kind of spam your graph with a whole bunch of telemetry data you may not care about. But we are looking at maybe adding a few more shortcuts, again, just to accelerate how quickly it is to connect those two services. So that's something that's on our roadmap, and we may end up doing. It's a great feature ask question. Yeah, I know, Christian, if you wanted to add more.
No, I think you answered that pretty completely.
Excellent. So we've got another good one here from Dan. And I do want to preface this one. Let's try to be cognizant of any privacy concerns around any customers who this story might be about. But Dan asks, would you be able to share the most interesting, maybe even unexpected scenario that you have seen digital twins used for?
I think it was actually a customer at Build, and again, won't share the name, but if I recall, the most unique use case that I've heard about was the digital twin of a human body, because they wanted to kind of monitor the different implants and parts of the body, whether it's like heart monitors or ear implants. And yeah, they wanted to create a digital twin solution of a human body, including data from the various sensors that may be implanted in the body. And again, very interesting use case. That was a first for me, at least. I don't know, Christian, if you've heard more interesting anecdotes on that one.
Yeah, for me, actually, the most interesting use cases that people are starting to do are use cases that go beyond IoT, where customers are starting to look at, and actually Sam touched on that a little bit with the whole story, from connected devices to connected environments, where people start to use digital twins really as a design pattern to bring together data from all kinds of different sources, not just IoT sources, and model really fairly complex business processes and business relationships and all the real-time look on all of that. And these use cases are super interesting because they go way beyond, like the traditional ways to think about, like streaming data from devices or anything like that. And even the whole core idea of digital twins to contextualize data takes on a completely different meaning when you look at data, like in a broader context than just IoT. So super interesting use cases in that word. And then another one, just for the for the fun effect,
Okay.
you know, like we have a customer who monitors cows with digital twins, so the health of a whole herd of cows, which I find quite interesting. And another customer is doing, you know, steel manufacturing, so that's a case where pretty much every sensor measurement you get all of a sudden has temperatures, you know, like way beyond 2000 degrees, which is kind of like fun to see when you see these dashboards.
Yeah, and to Christian's point, we learn about new use cases every day. So that's been the fun part of this journey, that some of these capabilities are unlocking, you know, beyond some of the more traditional use cases we may have thought about. And that's been great to see, that this technology is unlocking so many different business use cases. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so we've got one here from George M. Or Jorge, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. In IoT device messaging at scale, the use of more efficient data formats is often required. For example, Avro and Protobuf are commonly used instead of plain JSON. Are there any good examples of serialized format of the data in a digital twin interface?
So in digital twins itself, so because, you know, like the way how you drive data into digital twins is through REST API calls, really in the REST API call, you basically make patch calls against digital twins. So at that point, you already will have resolved your device incoming format into basically a REST API call and the format in the REST API call. So at that point, digital twins directly does actually not deal with the decoding of your on-wire message formats that come from devices. And when you interact with the Azure Digital Twins APIs, basically the return data that you get is effectively JSON data that you get back from the REST APIs. So again, at the point where data arrives in digital twins, it's already basically JSONified, if you will.
Excellent. And that was a tough one there. I got another hard one for you. So do you see use cases for Azure Digital Twins v2 for creating simulation environments for deep reinforcement learning?
Yeah, that's actually something that we're seeing more and more. Perhaps you have also heard about Microsoft's acquisition of Bonsai, you know, as a deep reinforcement machine teaching platform. So basically, in that platform, you do use simulation driven by the machine learning system to basically figure out, by throwing literally like lots and lots of input conditions at the simulator and then measuring the results from it, how you actually get closer to the desired outcome. And we see increasingly interest from customers to drive these sort of solutions through digital twins, where digital twins basically takes the role of managing all the data transfer and the event handling that basically drives these simulations or drives Bonsai to then in turn, you know, like drive the simulation environment. And in the end, the outcome of that process is often a machine learning model that then replaces some parts of the solution in operations, often for efficiency and cost effectiveness in operations of it. So we're seeing this more and more, and we're definitely looking into that, you know, like to make sure that all these use cases work very, very smoothly for our customers.
Yeah, and we also have Sam briefly mentioned Ansys, for example, a great partner who is doing exactly that, taking Azure Digital Twins as that core layer that helps with all things modeling, have a live graph, keep things up to date, and then leveraging their domain expertise on simulation, physics-based simulation, and kind of augmenting and leveraging ADT to drive a lot of those scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually in exactly that scenario, you can actually use something like Bonsai as an intermediate platform where basically you drive Bonsai from data from digital twins, and then that gets in turn basically simulated through Ansys, through the Ansys multi-physics simulator. And through that you get really, really interesting scenarios where you get highly optimized outcomes in the end. So that is definitely very much a cutting edge approach right now.
Excellent. And just for the audience out there, if you are interested in learning more about this Ansys solution, there is a video on the IoT show from Olivier Bloch where he speaks with developers and they walk through that solution. So try to look that one up. We'll see if we can get someone to post a link to that in the announcements, but do tune into the IoT show if you are interested in more information on that particular implementation. Here's another interesting one. This one is from Anonymous. Will we have access to a graphical view of our digital twins environment?
So yeah, we do actually have a sample application that is open source. You find that under the name Digital Twins Explorer in GitHub. That basically gives you a 2D visualization of the twins graph you have in Digital Twins. You can run queries against that and play out with queries, edit properties. You can even create a twins graph from scratch, upload models to ADT to customize your instance with your custom domain vocabulary and all these things. It is a sample application, so it's available fully in source code. It's a JavaScript application, so it's right there.
And we've had really cool. Customers and partners take it, augment it, contribute back. So it's open source and open to contributions and ideas and how to make it better as well.
Yeah, and we're planning a lot of new work on this over the next few months. So there will be lots of new stuff there.
Excellent. All right, we got one here from Yuri. Are there plans to allow the live execution environment into IoT Central?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely on our roadmap, and we'll probably have more to share in the coming months. But again, having ADT continue to nicely integrate with all these various Azure services is critical based on customer feedback. So yeah, stay tuned. Nothing to announce today on that front, but it's definitely on the roadmap. Yeah.
Excellent. Here's one that gained some popularity really fast. 8 upvotes here. Do you consider geo-redundancy in multi-region scenarios for Azure Digital Twins?
Short answer, yes. We're looking at all these scalability and reliability scenarios. So there's a lot of work going on in this. Yes.
Yep.
Oh, wow. We've got yet another one here from Oliver. Where would you recommend that a newbie goes to learn all about Azure Digital Twins? Like you're new to all this, you don't know what it is. Where's the best place to start?
Yeah, I think so. The best place to start is go to our Azure docs, and we'll share the link, at the end of the session. But we actually do have a great set of small, tutorials, how-tos. We have one really basic sample that, again, if you're just getting started, it kind of walks you through some of the basic APIs. It lets you play around. As Christian talked about, we have the ADT Explorer. That's also a great tool to get started because it lets you also visually interact with the graph and see how things kind of come together. And I think just, as a developer, looking at samples, changing code here and there, looking at it conceptually and visually as you're playing with the ADT Explorer sample, those are what I would recommend as kind of the best place to start. In addition to definitely go look at some of the customer stories, because another place for getting started is people ask, well, what kind of use cases or business problems can I solve with this technology? And those customer stories and some of the customer stories in the IoT show are great concrete examples of what some of our customers and partners have built. And it can really give you some really concrete ideas on the types of problems you can also go solve.
Excellent. So yeah, I will mirror that and say that I think docs.microsoft.com, the documentation is a great place to start. But also, if you're interested in an interactive way to learn all about Azure Digital Twins, I had the pleasure of viewing Pamela Cortez has a deep dive IoT series that features Christian. If we can get a link to that in the announcements, I thought that it was just wonderful. It was an hour long and literally went through everything, answering quite a few of the questions, in fact, that have come up here. So showed the visualization, how to get started, how it all works under the hood, really everything that you need to know. So I do not know the title off the top of my head, but we will try to get that published into the announcements. I do regret to inform everyone that we are coming at the end of time for our session. Now, I will leave you with a number of resources here. If you do view the slide deck currently, there is a collection of modules that we have on Microsoft Learn where you can interactively learn about these topics for yourself. Similarly, we've got links to the Digital Twins product overview, which will give you a nice brief description on how to use all this, as well as additional links out to relevant things like documentation. If you're interested in learning about anything else pertaining to IoT here at Ignite, we've got an excellent post up on the IoT tech community that can be found at aka MS, IoT at Ignite 2020. And I'd like to plug Pamela's deep dives yet again at the very end here. You can find all of them at aka.ms/IoT/deep dive. That includes the one with Christian that tells you everything you need to know about Azure Digital Twins. So before we sign off here, I just want to say thank you, Ines and Christian, for joining us on Ignite 2020, answering our questions live from our audience in this virtual hangout of ours. And again, we're so pleased to have you all attend here and really appreciate you taking the time to provide the questions. So we can't wait to learn what you guys build with, guys and gals build with the Azure Digital Twin service, and would love to hear all about it. So feel free to tell us on Twitter, if you've got anything awesome that's in the works. You can hit us up, Olivier Bloch, Paul DiCarlo, Pamela Cortez. All of us are constantly monitoring. We'd love to hear what you're building. So until next time, we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.